what I want to lead you back to is one of the things that I'm involved in currently is discussions that involve China. And I don't know, some of you may know that it's now the official, well, it has been for a number of years, been the official policy of the Chinese Communist Party, which is kind of an interesting country, you know, a Chinese Communist Party running the most aggressive capitalist economy in the world. But the frame of an ecological civilization. So this is the center of a conversation about a fundamental human choice to shift our civilizational frame. And you've done some of the most beautiful writing I've seen on the nature of the Chinese philosophy and cosmology. And how do you think about that as a foundation for our rethinking? And how does that relate, and how would it integrate with our the Western views, which give us this capacity for science, but at the same time disconnect us from our reality as living beings?
Yeah. Sure, thank you. Thanks, David. And yeah, like a big theme in my book, The Patterning Instinct, in fact, is looking at, while we look at how Western thought followed this kind of dualistic path that David was describing, this separation of mind and body, and humans' role to conquer nature, and nature as a machine, it looks quite deeply at this parallel path that Chinese civilization took, which really didn't have this break from its earliest indigenous roots that we see in the West. And what we see is this really profound and incredibly sophisticated way of understanding the cosmos as being interconnected. In each of these big civilizations I look at, I try to identify what's the underlying metaphor that the whole construction of meaning is based on. And when we look at traditional Chinese thought, I come up with this metaphor of the web of life, like the harmonic web of life in which the Chinese see things happening. And you can get the sense, if you just sort of think of walking in a forest, and you look at a cobweb that's there and maybe as part of a branch of a tree, and you know that just a tiniest little drop of water or just a leaf falling into that cobweb will cause reverberations on the whole web, no matter how small it is. And the Chinese saw themselves as living in this kind of web of heaven and earth and humans all together, which led to this very different sense of recognizing that the idea then of what a sage, the ultimate sort of place for a human to go, was not to just go into this place of true pure mind, which was this Western philosophical notion, but to actually harmonize with nature. And a big amount of the Chinese wisdom was spent on how do you integrate with the natural world, and how do we as humans be integrated within ourselves rather than split between mind and body. Like a simple example is that the Chinese word for mind is heart. So it is actually shin, which actually directly translates to mean the heart. So the very notion of mind was embodied. So what I find so fascinating, though, is that in modern systems science, whether it's systems biology, complexity science, chaos theory, network theory, these are these sciences that actually also develop out of the same mindset, looking at how everything is connected and trying to understand from the scientific point of view. Because I think it's important that we don't get caught up in the sense of any kind of golden age in the past, or a sort of golden civilization, or hunter-gatherers, oh, they really knew how to live in harmony with life, or the Chinese, if only we could get back to how they were thinking 1,000 years ago. One, we're not going to go back there, and two, it's not even true. For all the great insights and wonderful things that came out of these different ages, there are all kinds of bad things around that too. We don't actually want to go back, we want to go forward. But I think the point is that we can gain wisdom from our indigenous roots, from the indigenous wisdom. We can gain wisdom from that traditional Chinese understanding and look at how that correlates with modern scientific thought to really potentially move into what David's referring to, that notion of an ecological civilization. One where we actually use technology to harmonize with nature rather than to kind of conquer nature or whatever. So that's where I see a real potential place for hope. And it's so interesting when we think about that in relation to China, because as you say, here we have the country that soon is going to be the leading country in the world in terms of gross domestic product, all of the stuff that is basically taking away natural resources, devastating the earth at too fast a rate. And here's the country that is doing that at the fastest rate, and at the same time, here's their leader offering a vision for an ecological civilization. So we ask, is this just kind of greenwashing, in some sort of Chinese way? Or is there really something there? And honestly, I don't know if any of us, other than maybe Xi Jinping himself, can truly know what the answer to that question is, and maybe he doesn't even know himself. Honestly, he's probably feeling in to where that's going. But I think the place where I feel we have reason for hope is one, just the very fact that as Xi Jinping, just last October, is taking this role of leadership, becoming pretty clearly like at least the second most powerful person in the world, he's offering this vision. He talks about, if you look at his speeches, he uses words that would be, if we heard one of our Western leaders use these words, a whole environmental movement would be going, yes, finally, we've got somebody looking at things in the right way. And he's choosing that. And we know that rhetoric doesn't actually, you have to believe that there's a relationship between rhetoric and reality. That's why we get so disturbed by what our president is saying in the White House, because the kind of rhetoric that he's putting out there could lead to utter destruction. So we recognize the relation between those two. So I do think there's tremendous sense for hope, and the possibility that deeply embedded within that Chinese culture is that sense of interconnection. So if he decides to lead with that, there's the potential where he might say, okay, China has now got enough power on the world stage. We can redirect away from that capitalist model that got us to this place and move towards something that's more sustainable, both for his interests, China's interests, and the world's interests. So I think there's a possibility of that.
Yeah.